Hi, I'm John Nerrell, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Now, if you haven't had a chance to listen to last week's episode about defining what it means to be stuck in your career, I'm going to piggyback off of that today. So you don't need to have listened to last week's episode in order to get the most out of this one, but I definitely encourage you to go back and listen to it if you haven't, because today I'm going to talk with you about your professional struggle. Now, struggling is a natural part of life. We struggle with so many things. We may struggle with our relationships, our health and our wellness, our financial well-being, and we struggle with our career paths. And in doing that, we kind of question, where do we find that kind of support? Now, first and foremost, I hope that you have someone in your life, be it your family or a dear friend and trusted colleague, that you are able to lean on them and vice versa for them to help you when you are going through those kind of professional struggles. And certainly, wherever you are finding ways to professionally develop yourself, podcasts like mine can be a huge help and a resource for you as you are figuring out what is going on with your professional struggle. Before we get into this too much, though, I want to give a huge shout out to Andrea S., who left this wonderful review for me. She writes, quote, "If you're feeling confused about how to position yourself or unsure how to prepare for a shift in your career or wondering how to promote yourself to the world, then this podcast is a wonderful resource. I love how John walks you through effective strategies to help you navigate the world of shifting your career so you can fully show up in your life. If your career feels a bit messy, listen in." Andrea, thank you so much for that review. And honestly, I can't think of a better segue to get us into what we're talking about today. Because what happens out of struggles are those kinds of shifts. But let's do that very intentionally and strategically. Let's not throw the proverbial spaghetti at the wall and looks to see which ones stick. That ends up wasting a lot of our time and not something we really want to do here. So, in terms of your professional struggle, let's acknowledge that it can happen at any age. If you go back and think about your first job, you probably professionally struggled getting used to working, getting used to the longer hours, whether you were standing on your feet all day, or the job was exceptionally labor intensive, or it was mentally exhausting. There were certainly moments when very early on you struggled. Just because you are older, just because you are at mid-career, does not mean that you have to have all of this figured out. That would be putting a lot of unnecessary pressure on yourself. And we're not going to do that in this podcast. We're just going to acknowledge that professional struggle can happen at any stage. But what I have seen through my life and in my career and in my work is that when we struggle at mid-career, it's very weighted. And it can also at times be very judgmental, whether it be self-imposed or placed upon us by others. At mid-career, we tend to worry about whether or not we're going to be able to advance, questioning our value. struggling to figure out where are you going to make that impact, wondering how are you going to be able to provide for your family, your loved ones? How are you going to quote unquote measure up to your classmates when you go to that dreaded or not so dreaded high school or college reunion? You want to be successful, but yet, in terms of figuring out how that gets measured, it may be causing you some struggle that is not feeling particularly good right now. There are things that happen in your career that are clear indicators or influencers that are going to cause that kind of struggle. You didn't get promoted. You got laid off. You didn't get the job you really wanted when you went into that interview. You were passed over for an opportunity at work. The project you're leading can't seem to get off the ground and is already over budget. Whatever that struggle is, let's acknowledge that there will always be times in our career when work gets hard, and that will cause us some struggle. When I first started out, I was a middle school mathematics teacher. And I love this example because there are times in a middle schooler's journey, or let me just say rather, in an academic journey, where subject matter gets difficult. And oftentimes in the courses I taught, and I taught all levels of students. Our students were tracked, meaning we had advanced classes and non-advanced classes. But I taught a 7th grade freshman level Algebra 1 course and an 8th grade sophomore honors level geometry course. What that meant was that if they successfully passed both of those classes, when they went as a freshman in high school, they were taking junior level classes like Algebra 2 and trigonometry. Okay. And some kids who had always done really well in math would get into my class, and all of a sudden it got difficult for them. And in fairness, because they were 12, 13, 14 years old, they didn't always handle it really well. And I can't say that when I was 12, 13, or 14 and I was going through school and things were tough, I didn't handle them well either. But there's so much to learn from this, because in that struggle was where they got to learn about themselves. They got to learn about what it meant to truly own where you are, to deal with guardians and parents and family members who were trying to be supportive, or maybe some who weren't as supportive, and trying to measure up to expectations that were placed on them, whether they were able to meet them or not. I remember talking with one of my students one day after school who was so upset they were not passing my class. And I looked at them and I said, I don't know if you realize this or not, but colleges don't ask for middle school transcripts. And they went, what? And I went, any college you apply to could care less what classes you took in middle school. They're only going to look at your high school transcript. I said, so what that means is that whatever we're doing here is just helping you for when you get into high school. And so if you are only 1 year ahead, quote unquote, instead of 2, you're still an advanced math student. So what if this wasn't a problem? And they looked at me and they were just like, I didn't realize that. And I said, okay, so how do I help you get through this? How do I help you with this academic struggle? It's one, we know this. It's one thing when things come easy for us, right? We're like, piece of cake, knock it off, boom, done. But when we're struggling, Oh, we get to learn some stuff. We get to learn some stuff about ourselves and what it is that we're doing. I was a solid B student through school. I worked my butt off, and some classes I got A's in, some classes I did not. But in that struggle, that's what we get to learn. But part of what I saw in my students and part of what I've seen with my friends and my colleagues, and today what I see with my clients, especially those who reach out because they are professionally struggling and they want some help with executive and career coaching, is that this is also more about a professional identity. They are deeply passionate about doing a great job and don't want to screw up. And so when work gets difficult, right, there's a fear of losing your identity and morphing into somebody else because you're not able to meet the expectations or the results that you thought you were able to achieve. And so then what? We see this with athletes. We see this athletes who are great high school athletes or even college athletes. And then they get to the pro level, and then all of a sudden it's really hard for them. And at mid-career, as it is in any other stage, but mid-career is your wealth building years. And so your compensation could also be tied maybe to how you are looking at yourself in terms of your value, your worth, or how somebody else is looking at how much you are valuable to them. And so when a recruiter comes along or a headhunter comes along and they offer you a job with another company and they say they're going to boost your salary by 10, 15, 20%, all of a sudden there's that, I get validated in a way maybe I hadn't thought about. It is in these identity issues that really allow us to show up and own where we are and think about our brand. But more importantly than anything, the struggle is all about how we get to welcome new opportunities. For so many of you, the pandemic and what happened in 2020 has been some of the greatest personal and professional struggle you have ever had. Whether you were laid off, furloughed, terminated, let go, fired, whatever those terms are you want to use, and you found yourself where for months you've not been able to find a job, that's hard. And I feel for you. And that is also part of your professional struggle. Or what if you are someone who is gainfully employed, but were asked to take a pay cut in order to retain other employees or to keep staff, to keep the company moving and operating at what it was? And so you're still working full-time hours, but maybe getting 75 or 80% of your pay. That's another professional struggle. One of the things, without question, that I strongly believe you will see in any networking conversation, or most specifically in an interview, is going to be this universal question about how did you maximize your time during the pandemic? What did you learn in 2020? How are you better on the other side in 2021, even though we are not fully out of this pandemic yet, because of what you've learned during that time? The pandemic and what's happened in 2020 and now in 2021 is a shared, universal, professional, and personal struggle that we are feeling right now. And the question I always come back to is, how will you show up? How will you show up if you know that your value is non negotiable? Look, while you're in it, struggling sucks. It's hard. It's not easy. If you have ever tried to run a 5K, a half, a full marathon, there's a lot of struggle there too, but you find ways to get through it. In your professional struggle, I invite you to think about whether or not you want to play this struggle safe or you want to play it big. Here's what I mean by that. You can stay where you are. You can hang out where you are, and whatever that struggle is, there is no judgment, because I believe you will do the best thing for you and your family and responsibilities and whatever it is that you need. There is no call to action or push here. But if you decide that you want to play it a little bit bigger, or you want to dip your toe in the water a little bit about trying to help you get out or move forward and getting past this kind of struggle, there's some different things you can do, right? So the first thing is look for a mentor. Look for someone either at your company or in your organization or in your network who is willing to serve in that mentorship role for you and help you. You can certainly hire a coach. Do something different than you've done before. Because what is that quote from Einstein about insanity is about repeatedly doing the same thing over and over again? Don't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. I had an opportunity earlier this month to speak to the Career Center staff and a group of students at St. Peter's University in New Jersey in a virtual webinar we did about virtual networking and interviewing tips. And one of the fascinating things that came up in this webinar that we were discussing had to do with two things. One was, how do you calm the nerves when you're interviewing? And we talked about how you practice and how you practice in front of a video camera or in front of a mirror, and you record yourself so you hear yourself reciting those answers. And certainly in another podcast episode, we're going to talk about virtual networking and interviewing tips as well. But one of the other things was that when it came to networking, I was talking with them about how we intentionally build relationships with people one at a time. We cannot take our professional struggle and think that we are just going to get through it in the blink of an eye. Just like building a substantial network, it happens over time. And struggling and getting through that happens over time as well. I encourage you to get really clear about the mind drama that's going on in your head, separating the truth from perception, separating the reality from the fabrication or the stories you want to tell yourself because it makes you feel better. Get clear on the actions you want to take and start building them one step at a time. That's what we're doing with this podcast, and that's what we're going to continue to be doing by sharing content and bringing you really exciting interviews with people who are going to tell their story in a way that you're going to be able to get some motivation or inspiration or learn from. But in playing it safe, it allows us to stay comfortable. In going big, it allows us to get uncomfortable, and that is not easy, nor is it always pleasant. But this is about making a choice. Whatever the struggle is, you're going to struggle with the mentality on either side. You're going to struggle being comfortable and being really unhappy, or you're going to struggle with being uncomfortable and recognizing that all of that is going to pay off in some way down the road. The other thing I want to leave you with is this. Our professional struggles make us vulnerable. And they make us vulnerable because we either clam up and keep everything inside of us, or we open up and we share with someone exactly what's going on. And that's why having a trusted colleague, a mentor, or hiring a coach who is going to be that person for you that is going to support and help you get through those things, there's a lot of value in that. But in order to get there, you have to be vulnerable. Hello, I'm not perfect. Hello, I messed up on my job. Hello, my project has gone sideways. Hello, I don't have a great relationship with my boss. Hello, I didn't get a raise this year. Hello, what happened to my bonus? Hello, I'm really unhappy in my job and I want to leave, but I don't know what to do. And I'm sure you can think of a dozen more struggles that you're having. Struggling in your career is part of the process. And what you're dealing with now, you are going to deal with something similar or different to that, I'm sure, down the road somewhere in your career. But learning the skills about what works for you in terms of getting out of that struggle, that's where the power is. That's where the good stuff is. And if I can help you in any way with that, I'd love to hear from you. Also, feel free to drop me a review and let me know what you're thinking about the podcast as well. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. But more importantly, if you know someone who is struggling in their career, kindly share this episode with them. That's one of the biggest compliments that you could give me and the work that I'm doing with this podcast, is to share it with someone who you think is going to help them. Because you're not alone in this struggle. We all go through it. We may not be going through it at the same time, but we all go through it. And we're going to go through it again. So I invite you to learn what's going to help you navigate through this struggle and be a whole lot better for it on the other side. All right. This wasn't an easy podcast, but we got through it. And I thank you for hanging out and listening to me. I will see you next time with another episode. But in the meantime, be kind to yourself, take care of each other, wear a mask, do what we need to do. And I wish you a great rest of the day. Take care. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen. If you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you would leave me a rating and review to let me know what you think, to help others find this podcast and continue to bring you relevant and useful content to help you navigate what's next for your career. And if you're ready to create your mid-career GPS and get rid of the overwhelm so you can find the job you'll love or love the job you have, visit my website at johnneral.com for more information about joining my private Facebook group and scheduling a free consult with me so we can start building your mid-career GPS together. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Neral Coaching. I'll see you next time.